Now, family members and parents say they've been left bitterly disappointed by the way government is handling the Enyobeni Tavern tragedy. The constant to and fro into the cause of the 21 teenagers' deaths has caused some parents to consider legal action. Families say they've had to rely on media reports for updates. Let's speak to legal expert Ulrich Roux, who joins me now to discuss this further and look into whether the families actually have a leg to stand on. Mr. Roux, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. I guess the first question is exactly that. Is there a loophole anyway for these families to first of all sue government for responsibility in terms of what happened to their children?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Well, in order for them to sue the government, they would have to be able to prove a causal link between the deaths of the deceased people and the government. So in other words, they would have to prove negligence or recklessness on behalf of government in order to prove that that is what led to the death of the teenagers. And accordingly, they would then have to attach a financial value to that or monetary value to that in order to be able to sue government. So at this stage, I think it would be too early to make a decision like that on whether they would be able to sue government or not. The actual cause of death must first be determined before a decision like that can be made.
Well, they've been told now suddenly that their children died from suffocating because of an overcrowded venue. And of course, their question is, but what happened a few weeks ago? Actually, on the day that it happened, it was ruled out that there was a stampede, etc. And then later on, they were told by the health department that methanol was involved. But when you talk about negligence and them being able to prove possibly that there was negligence, could they go, for instance, against the liquor board? Who approve or give people a liquor license, maybe for saying that they were negligent in coming back to that particular establishment to make sure that even when they were renovating, they still were sticking to the stipulations given to actually receive a license to trade?
Yes, I think the big problem at this stage is that the actual cause of death has not been determined yet. Initially, it was reported that it was poisoning which led to the death of the teenagers, and now a report has come out to say that it was in fact suffocation, but yet the families have not been given access to the post-mortem reports, which is certainly problematic. One would expect the state pathology labs to make those reports available to the family members and to play open cards with them and to take them into their confidence. If they still persist in not allowing the family members to see the post-mortem reports, then the family members could make use of the Promotion of Access to Justice Act, PIA, or Access to Information Act, PIA, in order to have sight of those post-mortem reports and then to determine exactly what the cause of death was. So once that has been determined, then one can take the next step. If the fault lies at the doorstep of the owner of the tavern, then certainly they could take legal action against the owner. If his establishment did not adhere to the regulations as set out in the Liquor Act, then definitely the blame could be placed at his doorstep and they could consider legal action against him. If it comes out that for instance the establishment did not have the necessary safety precautions in place, such as emergency exits, proper ventilation, etc., then also he could be held liable. If it turns out that the liquor board was supplying his establishment with liquor and he was not in possession of a valid liquor license, then certainly that would also hold severe repercussions for him and for the liquor board. But again, the causality is the big question here, and they would prove that because the teenagers were sold alcohol and that establishment was in fact not permitted to sell alcohol, and they were selling alcohol to underage drinkers, the liquor board could get into trouble. But there's numerous phases that first have to be completed, and extensive investigation needs to take place before liability can be established in this matter.
And how sensitive is, the law when it comes to, for instance, maybe if the parents decide to sue government or a government entity such as the Liquor Board, can they use the argument that if your child is 13 years old, where do you think they are at that time of the evening? Can they use that as an excuse? Because, government has been saying numerous times that this is a societal issue. It's not only an issue that faces government. The fact that there were parents who, for instance, didn't know where their 13-year-olds were at that time of the day also counts as something.
Yes, remember, this is a very sensitive topic. I mean, one can just imagine the grief that the family members and the parents have had to endure as a result of the death of these teenagers. But at the end of the day, one must look at where the buck stops. And the buck stops with an establishment who sells alcohol to underage drinkers. So that is where the responsibility will lie. If it turns out that, they were selling alcohol to them unlawfully and that they were not supposed to be allowed access to their establishment, then certainly the establishment could be held liable. I mean, it is a South African law that no persons under 18 are allowed to purchase alcohol in an establishment such as this tavern. And if that was indeed the case, and it can be proven that the establishment was selling alcohol to underage drinkers, then certainly liability could be, placed upon the tavern owner. I don't think that, parents who were not sure where their children were at that time of the night, could be held liable. At the end of the day, it is the fact that they were allowed access to an establishment that sells alcohol, which could have led to the death of the teenagers. But once again, we first need to establish what caused the death of these teenagers. And only the postmortem reports, once the family members and possibly the media have had sight of them, will be able to prove that, whether it was in fact poisoning or was suffocation, as has now been, alluded to.
Said, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Roux, for your time. It looks like an open case, really, for the NPA, because there's a lot of video footage proving that these young people were actually sold alcohol at this particular establishment. But that was Ulrich Roux. He is a legal expert from Ulrich Roux and Associates. Now,